Margie Peterson here with you all at Stomp Stronger Together on Middle Pause. This is a podcast for women in the middle of their life to explore their journeys, what's working, what isn't working, and how to inspire others when they are going through midlife changes, no matter where that midlife is. Today, as our guest at Stomp is Audrey Stimson. Audrey is an acquaintance of mine virtually through our Ninja Writers group. And Audrey is a fascinating person because she just made a career move. And I want to introduce you to her. Hi, Audrey.
Hi, Margie. Thank you very much for having me on this podcast and for inviting me to be part of Stomp. I'm really excited.
Well, we are so glad to hear from people who have a different journey, because when you are struggling in life, and struggling doesn't mean you don't have a home. Sometimes that is the case. You feel isolated. And it's nice to hear that you're not the only one who says, okay, I have as a first question for you, I found out you were a bicyclist. I've been on my bicycle twice this year. So I'm not really a bicyclist, though I love my townie. But my brother was a bicyclist, and he was also a journalist. So for you, because you are a bicyclist, which one came first, being a journalist or becoming a bicyclist?
Well, bicycling as such came along long time ago. I think I started riding my bicycle when I was about 3 years old, but put it aside, journalism came into my life after I left university. And I would say journalism sort of was a big spot in my life. And then bicycling came to me when my now husband, introduced me to something that's special, a special type of bicycling. It's not only commuting, which I have done in my past, but it's bicycle touring. It's seeing the world from the saddle of your bicycle and bringing all your bags along and doing that and sort of experiencing the world on a slow roll. And that's what we do.
And so how long have you been doing this?
I started doing that in about 2011. I live in California. We started out with tours along the California coast, which is actually some of the hardest riding in the world because you have the very steep coastal ranges and Big Sur. People know that it's very hard. And then we went from there. We did a little bit in Europe. And then one day in 2015, we decided to take a bicycle tour across the United States, 3,700 miles of bicycle riding.
So that would have been West Coast to East Coast. Did you go up? Did you go down? Which states did you visit?
Yeah, we took a train from Los Angeles, where we live, up to Portland, Oregon, and then got out of the train, rented a little minivan with our bikes and bags, and went all the way to Astoria, Oregon, where we reassembled our bicycles and our bags, went to the Pacific Coast, christened our bicycles with Pacific Coast water, and started our ride. So we rode through Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana, North Dakota, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and to Washington, D.C. We ended up actually in Annapolis, Maryland. So it was sort of coast to coast.
And I've been to Annapolis. It's really one of the wonders. When I got there, I had traveled there with my mother, and I didn't use the map right. And all of a sudden I was at this bay and I was at this house, and I thought, if I didn't know better, I thought I'd be in Stillwater, Minnesota, but it wasn't. It was Annapolis, Maryland, because these bays are just like the bays in a state like mine, Minnesota, which is the land of 10,000 lakes. So how long did it take? Is there anything you want to share? Because people must have been watching you.
Yes, it happened that my husband retired and I still had several years of working to do, but I took a sabbatical. I took a time off. I asked my employer if I could take 3 months off. And they said, yes, you can. That's all you have. So we had to do it within that time. In all, we did it in 72 days of riding and 80 days in total And that meant that we did, in the end, an average of 67 miles a day. So we
Was
had
that
to,
tough or was that easy?
it was,
That sounds horrible to me, but I don't know.
well, I mean, I think that most people look at it in a way that, you see the 3,700 miles, and it is very long, but you got to chunk it down. And you have to say, first of all, you're never going to be on the first day as fit as you will be on the last day. And you build up to it. Of course, the hardest parts are going over 3 Rocky Mountain passes and doing that, sort of 7 miles straight up at 8% grades. That's hard. There's a lot of hardness in the middle. Montana's a big state, North Dakota. And as much as you think North Dakota is flat, it's not. It's kind of rolling hills, but it's straightaways and it's continuously, the long, open, big sky, straight gets boring sometimes. So you have to work with your mind to get you through the day. Yep.
So did you camp at night or did you stay at hotels? Because I have no idea how anybody would do this.
Yes, we intended to camp most of the time. We hit a heat wave in the eastern part of Oregon and Washington. So we lost time and lost mileage. I mean, we didn't make our miles as we planned it. We planned it out mostly. And then, so camping takes time. Also in the middle of the country, there are no hotels, no motels, and you have to camp. But when we could, we camped in public parks. We would ask people, could we camp in your little park? And they'd let us. But then when we did get motels, when we got back to quote unquote civilization, we opted for motels quite often because it was faster. We could come in, go to bed, get up in the morning, and then ride on the next day. So we did that in the end once we got into from Fargo on, I would say.
Okay. So Fargo is civilization. I'm just teasing because there's a movie about it. As you traveled, you and your husband, did your relationship do anything different? Who was the taskmaster? Or was it always a group decision? Marriage on that other end of retirement, I'm not there yet, can be very different. I've heard that from others.
That's a good question. And I want to sort of dispel sort of myths about the idea of doing something like this together. The one thing is, you are as close as you are riding mostly one in front of the other. And my husband took the lead often. I was fine with that. You don't talk to each other. You don't have the 24/7 with that person. You're riding alone. You're spending the time in nature, in and around this country by yourself. So you're in your head. You turn inward rather than outward. And I mean outward in the sense that you absorb what you're seeing and feeling and smelling and being part of in the geography of this country, as well as the little places you go to. But people think, I could never spend that much time with my husband. But you're not really spending that much time. And at night, you're so tired that you don't even talk. You basically plan, where are we going the next day? Where are we going to sleep? What are we going to do? And then at lunch, you say, okay, how many more miles can we actually really realistically do? And that's it. So yes, there were some pain points when I wanted to go a little further than he did. And for him, it was a vacation. He was retired. And for me, I had to get back to work and I wanted to do this. And that's a little bit about what I wrote a book about this. And it's a memoir about the United States, about my mindset at that time, and the idea that the broken parts of this country can sometimes parallel some of the brokenness that you may perceive in your past. And those little secrets are revealed in my book. So it's a memoir about doing hard things and finding out who you really are.
So at the end of the journey, you must have felt victorious. Were you a different person as a result of finishing that journey? Because it's a pilgrimage.
It is indeed. I think it's a slow process of letting that journey sink in, and the enormity of it takes time to settle in your body. Of course, I had to jump right back into the rat race, which took away from it a little bit, but at the same time, yes, you don't know the day you finish, but a year, 2, 3, 4, it sinks in and you understand how important that ride, that journey to yourself, as I reveal in my memoir, is. And that's
So,
the important thing.
so that 2015, that was when you said you did it. I'm trying to think, is it Jack Kerouac and On the Road and all these other ideas? It's a different journey, the way they describe it. And for you, it was a completely different experience. Do you feel it was spiritual in the end? Or was it just a
Absolutely.
physical?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I think the idea of the road trip and doing it like we did, or doing a long walk, gets you to a presence of the moment that you don't have when you drive past and you speed past and you don't smell it. You don't feel the topography. You don't feel what's around you. You don't sense the enormity and the beauty of this country like you do when you're sort of naked on a bicycle. I wasn't naked, but sort of out there. And it gives so much. And I didn't understand that until I started writing about it. I kept a little blog, but it was just sort of emails to my family to make sure that they knew we were still alive. But other than that, it was, and the book is about a spiritual awakening.
Hey, the next thing I wanted to ask you about is that you've got some other projects that you're working on and other ideas that you have that are percolating. Because I know you've got a book that you're writing and you've decided a different approach to it, but you've got some other things you wanted to describe. So I'm passing it over to you because we can get to that point where you decided enough of working, but that's not like the best way of putting that. So I'm over to you.
Well, I think after I finished the journey, I went back to work. And my work is particularly interesting. It's actually something that most people describe as the most interesting job in the world, depending on what you like. But I get to travel around America and tell stories about America to the Europeans. I speak fluent German. My mother was German. My father was an American diplomat in Germany when I was born, so I lived an international life. I went back to work and I realized, as a hypersensitive, intuitive person that I was and am, the difficulty of doing stories about mass shootings, for instance, school shootings. The very first story I did with the network ARD German television was Columbine, for instance, and several others followed. And doing stories about natural disasters. I was at Katrina. I was there. I saw it. I felt it. I saw the people. I was in Haiti during the earthquake. All of that, it sort of opened up a deep-seated post-traumatic stress disorder that I didn't want to acknowledge. And doing this go, go, go work that I did was really painful. I have other parts of me that speak to another trauma. My mother was a survivor of World War II. She lived her first 12 years under Hitler. She survived the bombing of Berlin. My grandmother was the head telephone operator of Hitler's command bunker. So she had to listen in on all of his communication with all of the generals in the front. My father, both of them passed away, my mother and father last year, had a specific secret job. I can say this now. My father was a CIA agent. and was an active operative in Europe during the Cold War. And I knew about that. All of this is revealed in different ways in my book. So talking about other projects, I've just FOIA'd, Freedom of Information Act, my father's files from the CIA, hoping to get some information. I think writing the memoir about the United States in my particular interest, because it was my father's attention to the national security of this country, gave this country a special relationship to me that maybe other people don't have. It was both a love and a hate. I wouldn't call it hate. It was more a love story about how special this place is, how precious it is, and how people outside of the United States look at it as this special beacon on the hill, and how sometimes we may take it for granted. So all of the divisions in this country have quite substantially affected me, and covering all of those terribly difficult stories and living with a lie that my father was actually a secret agent, and I knew that, and I couldn't express myself. So I had to live way back behind the camera, behind my expression, behind my creativity. And mum was my life until I sat down at the page and started writing this memoir, and it all came out.
I was a child of a politician, and he was a speechwriter. And he wrote the speech that Eisenhower made famous, the military-industrial complex. And I see that now as a word. I mean, I love how it's being played. It's always being made fun of now. And I'm going, Dad, you'd be so proud. People are making fun of that speech. That means we've come so far. But again, because somebody's got this job that's so important, you really have to say, oh, I can't do that. I can't do this. I can't do this, because other people will be affected. It's a burden, and you don't know it's trauma until you've been released from the trauma. And I don't know if it happened in 2015 or at their death. It's hard to know. I'm so glad that we shared that. And we had kind of spoken about that once in a meeting, and I thought, people who are on the other end of it don't know what it's like to be the preacher's daughter or the preacher's son. It's analogous, because you are taking care of the world as you understand it. So I just wanted to share that.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's fantastically interesting. And yeah, I mean, that speech, amazing.
Yeah. And so we have that thing.
You're
working on this other story, which is more about your dad's story and your relationship to it. So you write memoir, and then you do other pieces. You decided at a certain point, what's the question?
Question is, I think you wanted to touch upon the idea that something actually did happen. In 2017, I sat at my desk and I said, I can't do this anymore. And I literally fell to my knees one day before going to work. And I told my husband, I can't do it. And I cried. I was in a pool of tears. And he said, quit. So it took me about 6 months. And I finally said, I've had enough. And it was only when I left, and I had some savings, and I started living off of that. And I decided to give myself a gift. And I was 54 years old. I said, I'm going to give myself a year of listening. So I literally sat under my pepper tree here in my house and listened to myself. I started doing art, working in community art projects, doing animation, doing all kinds of different things. And then one day somebody picked me up from a sort of a conference and drove me home. And she was a writer, a poet. And she said, how about writing? And I said, no, I can't. I still had that silencing from the secret and the lies of my father. She said, think about it. So I saw her again, sort of serendipitously at a cafe here in town. And she said, are you writing? No. Well, go to this class. Jack Grapes, Los Angeles, Jack Grapes, go. Next day I signed up, and the rest is history. And then I started writing the book. And then about 2 years in, I ran out of money and had to I sort of didn't crawl back. I left on extremely good terms. I said, I'll work some freelance gigs for you guys if you need me. And I then did a bunch of films. And this year they had an opening, which was bizarre. They gave me my job back, but only half time, which is wonderful. It's like 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off. So 2 weeks I get to write, and then 2 weeks I get to gallivant around the country, and I use that material for writing too. So I publish on Medium a lot of articles about my travel around the United States and my travel and sort of memoir about what it feels like to be a journalist.
Oh my goodness. You didn't ask for it. You said, I have to quit. And you had a supportive husband, which is helpful. It doesn't always work that way. You got what you wanted to a certain degree. It's always easier if you quit on your own terms rather than be terminated. The resentment takes a while to resolve, if ever. When you realized you were burned out, what were the signs? Because not everybody has the same signs. Do you even want to share that, or is that too personal?
Well, I think it's, is it personal? I would say uncontrollable emotional swings, too much substance abuse, maybe one too many glasses of wine. The big thing that I have learned from writing and writing a memoir is I've learned to listen to myself and be okay with what I hear, whatever it is, the mess of my life, the happiness of my life. And I've learned through the bike ride and through conquering of the mountains and the miles to really live in those tiny little moments and be in those moments fully, to let them just happen however they happen. And even if I have to stop, I learned things about myself. And then the writing has helped quite a bit to release myself from sort of this baggage. And I've entered into still the news world, and I've continued to do strange things and not very nice things.
Now, when you
And
say nice things, you mean covering stories that are not very nice?
covering stories where people say strange things about America, and where there's people arguing across the aisle, and all of this stuff that we've been witnessing. And I've been in the middle of it, from rallies on all sides. I've been in it all,
The whole
anyway,
time.
from the whole time, and I just got off of, right before the midterms, I was in 5 states, talking to various voters and heard all sorts of things. For me, the discussion isn't about America right and left. It's about what story is best for us to move into the future and to come together. I just want the unity to happen, in a positive way. The book right now is entitled Across the American Dream, a bike ride across the United States and back to myself.
And that's the one that's
I'm
published.
a little No,
Oh.
it's still, that's the one I'm still working on. It's not
Okay.
published. I'm looking for a publisher. I'm working on it still. I'm polishing it to its best face so that it can go out and I can find some agents. But that's where I am right now, and I feel happier than I've ever felt. Close to 60 now. I'm glad that I took that break and I entered back into the workforce with a different attitude. It's almost like a distancing, but also a deeper immersion in life itself. Where before I felt like I was on the sidelines, I felt traumatized because I saw everything falling apart and I couldn't pick up the pieces and put them back together again. Now I feel like through my writing process, through other ways, I can be at least a little bit more in the game than I was before.
It's
More
not
connected.
surviving it. I don't know if that's a summarization that's not fair, but when there's all that anxiety or anger that's there, and you don't know where you fit into it, it's just coming at you. By taking some time out, you realize it's not you, it's the flow, and you're able to withstand it maybe better.
Exactly.
I don't know if that, but
Yeah.
And it does take some adversity to do that. That is so wonderful. And the rest of the world needs to hear that this is happening in all of the countries really right now, because we are, all of us, worrying about where the next meal is coming from, housing. Are our GDPs going to be okay? Are our governments going to be stable? It's very difficult. And I didn't know we would be going into a discussion of political life, but it was because of our parents believing in doing this. And it's our heritage, and which I find fascinating. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, because we could go on and we'd talk for about 3 hours and people would be going, wow, man, I don't understand. But we won't. That this has been wonderful. People who don't know what it's like to be the child of a government and a governmental figure who works in government doesn't know the load that is put on the entire family. It's an enormous load. And to be freed from it doesn't always happen until their death, but also until you make a decision. I'm so glad that you shared that, because it was touching and memorable and something for people to think about. Like, why is that person looking so bland? They have to.
I'm quite excited that I'm a little bit sad that my dad didn't see the book published. He was supportive, and I read several chapters to him, and he really enjoyed it because it is an ode to America also, and that was something that he felt strongly about. So he was close to 95, and he was excited about the book too.
The thing I want to stop with is just, it's so wonderful to actually meet you, and because you are a very thoughtful person. And I think you've shared some wisdom about what goes on when you're burnt out. You've given us the name of your book. I know you have a website. Is there anything else you want to share about how to reach you in a way that isn't overwhelming for you?
People can reach out. My website is audreystimson.com. Audrey, Audrey, Stimson, STIM as in Mary, SON. You can send me an email. It's mail@audreystimson.com. I read my emails, and you can follow me in Medium. It's my name. Look for my name. And I'm excited to be part of Ninja Writers too. And, Stomp is a great podcast, and Middle Pause is wonderful. And I hope many people are going to read all these articles and enjoy supporting them. Debbie Walker's she's a shining star, and in our stable of wonderful stars in Ninja Writers. So, yeah.
It's true. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your deep reflections. We will see all of you the next time we are here on Stomp.